Hello and welcome. When you look at the divisions in our world, it's easy to feel a little hopeless. But what if there was a story, a real-life example of a community that's been wrestling with one of the toughest challenges, racial unity, for over 100 years? Today, that's the story we're going to explore, the century-long effort of the American Bahá'í community.
I want to start with this quote. It's from a letter the Baha'is wrote to the U.S. president back in 1992 during the LA riots. It says the violence and turmoil are just symptoms of an old congenital disease. Think about that phrase, a congenital disease. It means the problem isn't just social or political, it's a deep spiritual sickness. And that perspective is the key to understanding everything that follows.
And this has never been seen as a quick fix. In fact, the Baha'i leadership has always described this work as a long and thorny path. It's been a century of grappling with what they call America's most challenging issue. So let's go back to where it all began.
Our story really starts in the early 20th century, a period from about 1912 to 1921. This is where the foundation for everything was laid, and it all revolves around one truly historic visit to the United States. Now, to really grasp the weight of this visit, you have to picture the America of 1912. It was a time of just brutal racial violence. We're talking about the Atlanta race riot a few years earlier, the Springfield race riot. There were even nationwide riots in 1910. This was the hostile, deeply divided atmosphere that Abdu'l-Bahá walked right into.
So who was this remarkable person, Abdu'l-Bahá? He was the son of Baha'u'llah, the very founder of the Bahá'í Faith, and his designated successor. And his visit in 1912 wasn't just a tour, it was a mission. His goal was to plant the core principle of the oneness of humanity deep into the heart of the small, struggling American Bahá'í community.
And the language he used was just revolutionary. In an era filled with dehumanizing rhetoric, he offered this stunningly poetic vision. He compared the races to jewels, black people to sapphires and rubies, white people to diamonds and pearls. He wasn't talking about mere tolerance. He was talking about a composite beauty that comes from their unity and blending. For 1912 America, that was an absolutely radical idea.
And he taught by example, not just with words. Get this story. In Washington, D.C., a deeply segregated city, Abdu'l-Bahá hosted a luncheon for social and political elites. And he personally sent for a guest, an African-American lawyer named Louis Gregory. But he didn't just invite him, he seated Mr. Gregory in the seat of honor, right by his side. It was a quiet but earth-shattering public defiance of the entire racial code of the time.
But he went even further, challenging one of the country's deepest taboos. At a time when interracial marriage was illegal in many states, he personally encouraged the union of that same Louis Gregory and Louisa Matthew, a white English Baha'i. Their marriage was meant to be a living, breathing demonstration of unity, a powerful precedent for the entire community. So this brings us to the next phase, a long stretch from the 1920s to the 1960s. After Abdu'l-Bahā's visit, the big challenge for the community was how to turn these radical words and examples into a daily reality. This would be a test of their resolve that would last for decades.
Now, Abdu'l-Bahá had also left a stark warning. He said that if this antagonism between white and black Americans wasn't checked, it would give rise to great calamities. Tragically, his words were prophetic. The Red Summer of 1919 and the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921 were horrific proof of just how urgent his message was.
So, in response to the escalating violence, and just before his passing, Abdu'l-Bahá set a new strategy in motion. He called for Race Amity Conventions. The very first one, held in D.C. in 1921, wasn't just another meeting. It was a proactive public effort to counter the hate with a new model for fellowship, something he called the cause of the Enlightenment of America.
After Abdu'l-Bahá passed away in 1921, leadership went to his grandson, Shoghi Effendi, who was known as the guardian of the faith. And he took on the immense task of guiding the community to really apply these principles, with a laser focus on race.
And Shoghi Effendi did not mince words. He called racism the most vital and challenging issue facing the community. With this, he turned the focus inward. The argument was, before Baha'is could ever help heal society, they first had to be absolutely relentless in rooting out prejudice from their own hearts and their own communities.
And he got very specific. He gave white believers the spiritual duty to abandon any sense of superiority and show genuine friendship. At the same time, he urged black believers to show warmth in response, be ready to forget the past, and to, quote, wipe out every trace of suspicion. It was this idea of a mutual, shared responsibility for building the bridge of unity.
Now, let's fast forward. By the 1970s and 80s, after decades of this intense, focused work, the makeup of the community started to change, and fast. It began to really reflect the amazing diversity of America itself.
The results were real, and you could see them. The community experienced incredible growth, especially among African Americans in the rural South. But it didn't stop there. Significant numbers of Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, Iranian refugees, and Southeast Asian believers also joined. That circle of unity was visibly expanding, and this was the fulfillment of the vision Shoghi Effendi had described so many years earlier. It wasn't just about diversity for diversity's sake. The goal was to create a single, harmoniously interwoven community, where every single culture, every background, enriched the whole beautiful fabric. This brings us to the 1990s, which became another major turning point. And just like before, it was a national crisis around race that sparked a whole new phase of public engagement.
In the aftermath of the 1992 LA riots, the American Bahá'í leadership didn't just issue a press release. They launched a major national campaign to share their vision of race unity. They took it to public officials and community leaders all across the country, basically offering their community's long experience as a contribution to the national conversation.
The next major development came from the highest institution of the Bahá'í Faith, the Universal House of Justice. This is the international governing council, which provides guidance to the entire worldwide Bahá'í community from its seat in the Holy Land.
Then in 1996, a message came from the Universal House of Justice that reframed everything. It declared that the entire 84-year history we've just covered was essentially just preparation for a new turning point of epochal magnitude. The goal now shifted to empowering local populations all over the world to drive their own social and spiritual progress from the grassroots up.
When you look at this century of striving, with all its progress, its setbacks, and its constant process of learning, you really understand what a long and thorny path it has been. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. What does this experience teach us about the kind of moral courage and sustained spiritual effort that's truly required to heal the deep wounds of a nation? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. If you'd like to get alerts about new deep dives that try to transform complex topics into clear, engaging presentations, please do subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you with us.